Hey everyone, welcome back to 5DT with me, and I am here to talk about where boundaries meet reciprocation. So as we jump deeper into what boundaries mean, I want to talk about three things in particular. The first thing being what are boundaries, the second being how to communicate them in a calm and kind manner, and then the third being what is going to be your response if those boundaries are tested, if those boundaries are crossed, maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 10 times. What is going to be your response? Because it's usually in that moment where they are being crossed, especially with someone that you never anticipated would be the one to cross them, that your nervous system responses kick in: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? And so going in prepared, understanding where your heart is coming from is how you're going to be able to best show up for yourself, how you're going to be able to show yourself self-love, self-compassion, and be able to nurture yourself through this transition as you begin setting down these healthy boundaries and as you begin to see how other people are going to respond to those. So again, coming back to starting with what is your boundary, right? There are two types of boundaries. So there are boundaries that we make with other people, and then there are boundaries that we make with ourselves. So when we talk about making boundaries with other people, it could be something like you start to get upset because someone has said something to you that has hurt your feelings. And instead of lashing out at them, instead of creating a scene, you may want to consider how you can have a calm, kind, honest conversation with this person, whether it's in the moment, which is ideal, or maybe you need to come back to it, but come back to it quickly and say, when we were talking about X, Y, or Z, I just wanted you to know that actually hurt my feelings. And here's why it hurt my feelings. But more than anything, I would like to understand what your intention was. This puts everything back onto the person and puts them in a place of self-reflection and puts them in a place where they have to think about, oh man, what did I actually do? Or what did I actually say? Did I intend that? And you will know by their response immediately as to whether it was hurtful intent or whether it was an innocent misunderstanding of some sort. Now, when it comes to boundaries with yourself, this is where the ego comes into play. And the ego's going to get tricky because it's always going to step in and want to say, no, I have all of this in place for you in order to protect you. But what we learn, especially as we get older, is the ego often steps in and does us big disservices because it's based off of old programming, old traumas, old history, things that we are now starting to heal, things that we're now starting to let go of, things that we're now starting to move on from. And those boundaries of the ego no longer serve us. So you literally have to have a boundary with your own ego, and you have to have a high level of self-awareness. You have to have a high level of emotional intelligence about yourself and who you are and what your needs are in order to be able to sit comfortably and analyze yourself in a way and say to yourself in a loving and kind manner, well, that's not something that I love about myself. I certainly wouldn't want someone to act that way towards me. So let me give you an example. So oftentimes when we start to get defensive in conversations, okay, that is often an opportunity for us to sit back and realize that there's potentially something being mirrored back to us at this point in time. And what is it that I can learn from this about myself? Because maybe I'm supposed to be learning from this. Maybe this is serving me instead of something that's being done to me. And so that's one type of healthy boundary that you can have with yourself. Now, all of that being said, again, it's all about being able to set the boundary in a kind, calm manner. So I don't want you to be trying to set a healthy boundary when things have escalated to a point with someone where there's shouting going on and there's all kinds of things going on. That doesn't mean to say that you can't say, I need to come back to this conversation at a different time when we've had a chance to cool off. Can we agree to revisit this in an hour? That would be a great boundary to have. But oftentimes, if we're reactive in those situations, it creates this vicious cycle where then we're just kind of reacting in the moment as opposed to being able to have that calm, gentle conversation where we can put down the healthy boundary. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about setting healthy boundaries, it certainly was my misconception, is the fact that saying no is somehow being selfish. Saying no is me somehow being mean or unkind to someone in some way, when in fact it's the exact opposite. So we have this ability to build up these narratives in our head. We build up these myths about what having healthy boundaries looks like. And I just want to let you know from my own trial and error, from my own life experience, I can say from the heart that oftentimes the narrative that I have created does not play out the way that I think that it will. And especially when it comes to healthy boundaries, sometimes the first person on your list that you thought was going to be the loyal, ride or die friend is the one that continues to press those boundaries, cross them on all kinds of occasions, no matter how many times that you ask otherwise. And sometimes the last person that you would have even thought would have respected your boundaries is the one who shows up for you. So we need to remember that the fear that comes up, the fear of rejection if we say no, the fear of abandonment if we say no, the fear of feeling guilty if we say no, the fear of angering someone or rocking the boat if we say no, or the fear of coming off or looking as if we're selfish because all of a sudden we still care about what everybody else thinks instead of worrying about what works for us and is best for us. All of these things come into play. And the biggest thing is being able to communicate in a clear, concise, truthful manner that comes from the heart, right? This is someone that you respect. This is someone that you love. This is someone that you've asked to be part of your life. So if you're bringing the conversation from the heart and you're explaining that this is what you need and they're not willing to give it to you, then that is only ever going to be a one-way street, right? And what we're working toward, especially as we take into consideration the third and final piece of the boundary portion, which is what is our response going to be if this person crosses the line, whether it's once, whether it's twice, whether it's 100 times. Even if it's a family member, and this is of course where it gets the most tricky for a lot of people because family is family. What is my response going to be? Am I willing to part with this person? Am I willing to step away from this friendship, this relationship, what have you, even if it's for a short period of time? Or do you need to do it for the long term? And these are difficult conversations, and these are usually the things that sit in our narrative and torture us into not behaving in a way where we are showing up for ourselves, and we begin to sit behind our mask and we people please, and we sit in that codependent relationship and we enable poor behavior toward us as a way of us, quote unquote, loving the other person, when in fact, if we were in a relationship that was unconditional with this person, platonic or otherwise, they would want us to receive love in return. So this reciprocation piece comes into play no matter which way you're looking at boundaries, because when you are no longer sitting in that one-way street where you're giving all the time and never being able to receive, when you are able to sit down with someone, have a healthy conversation where things don't even necessarily escalate, you're just having a conversation that may be difficult, but is healthy because you're both coming from an authentic place, you're both speaking from the heart, and you're both giving each other the space and the bandwidth to be heard, to be seen, and to show up for each other in a way that makes you both understand that you matter. You matter. You matter to this person and you matter to yourself. That is the healthiest way for us to sit in our own authentic selves, to sit in our own personal power and personal sovereignty. It's the healthiest way we can communicate with other people. It's the healthiest way for us to set a foundation for having relationships. And this may all sound really overwhelming to some of you, but I guarantee you that if you have come upon this video right now and you've made it the whole way through, there is a reason why you are showing up to hear these words. Because at the end of the day, if you do not show up for yourself, if you do not advocate for yourself, nobody else is going to advocate for you. No one is going to show up for you the way that you show up for yourself. And it's a tough world out there. And the saddest part about all of it, especially as we begin to evaluate these relationships and whether they need to stay or whether they need to go, is the fact that there are always going to be people in your life who are only going to love the broken version of you or the broken pieces of you. And they're never going to truly love the person where you show up as your most authentic self and you're asking for your needs to be met and you're receiving what you need in return from the other person. So when you start putting yourself back together again, when you start getting healthy, when you start putting down boundaries, when you start communicating in a way that is clear and honest and coming from the heart, and you begin to ask for what you really need out of that friendship, out of that relationship, and those people can't give it to you, those aren't your people. Unfortunately, that's a sad truth. I'm not here to try and get you down. I'm just here to try and be honest about what happens when we are sitting in that very codependent, very enabling, very people-pleasing kind of mentality, and we're not fully showing up for ourselves. Because once we do all of that, once the reciprocation starts coming in, that's when we get to a place where we can start manifesting some really cool stuff into our lives for ourselves. Again, I've had this conversation. I know it comes off as cliche sometimes, but I can't say it enough. I would rather sit and have a small plate full of friends, family, and close, loyal relationships in my life, rather than have a large entourage of people whom I'm always questioning their loyalty, whom I'm always questioning whether or not they've got my back, whether or not I have this true belonging that we've talked about in the past. And I'd rather stay in that small subset of people and continue my search, continue my adventure, continue my journey in finding who my tribe is, who my people truly are. So, as always, thank you for joining me for 5DT with me. I hope you enjoyed this message. It's been coming in loud and clear energetically for the last several weeks. And if it hit a nerve, if it inspired something in you, if it's something where you want to sit down and you want to talk about it more, just let me know. And as always, I am in such gratitude to our community and for all of those who continue to show up and show out in a positive way with all of their love and light. And I look forward to seeing you at the next 5DT with me.